Hello and welcome to the Bloodstream Podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community. Brought to you by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I am your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Bradford, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
On today's show, we are back from the Bleeding Disorders Conference that took place just a few weeks ago.
In Atlanta.
In Atlanta, Georgia. Feels like it was forever ago,
I know,
actually, at this point.
It does.
Like, what month was that? What year was that?
It does, but we're going to share our musings.
We are. We have musings. We'll share them. We don't keep our musings close to the chest. What? Close to the vest? Close to something that rhymes with that? The latest I'm Fine mental health segment will feature guest host Michael Bishop.
Yes.
Welcome, Michael. And the CEO from the Plasma Proteins Therapeutics Association, Anita Brikman, is back to share more on what is International Plasma Awareness Week. How about that?
Yes.
We've got all of that and more on today's episode. Welcome to Bloodstream.
Hey, y'all. Thank you for joining us today, as always. And if you like what you hear, please share this episode with your friends and your family on social or all the things. And also subscribe to the Bloodstream Podcast so all these episodes just appear.
Like magic. That's such a great idea. I also want to remind you, dear listeners, that the Bloodstream Podcast is indeed made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I don't just say that at the beginning. It's true. That's right. Takeda. Takeda's got this website. You may have heard of it. bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda, Amy Bradford, believes in a world free of bleeds, and they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. You can learn more by simply visiting, get this, bleedingdisorders.com. One more time because, I know, bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the Bloodstream Podcast, I would just like to say, with a LaCroix in hand, thanks, Takeda.
Oh, thank you, Takeda.
The LaCroix was a big part of it.
Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh, what did you think of the BDC? I saw you twice.
We really don't see each other outside of this podcast studio.
It's really true. It was also humongous. There were lots of people that connected with me on the back end. I didn't see ya. I
know. Well, and I feel like this is a theme every year at the BDC. Too big.
Right.
Conference center, too big. And I know the feedback is always we're of a size, we need a certain size space. But this one was just particularly labyrinth-like. It was up 2 escalators to go down 3 escalators and across a sky bridge and then around the thing and up the horn and the South Tower, the North Tower. I would love to have had just an aerial overview map of my routes as I went from place to place, because I don't think this is a joke. I don't think I ever went from point A to point B directly. I think every time I was South Tower, North Tower, South Tower Convention Center.
Yes.
It was never direct.
Yes, for sure.
So that's my main takeaway. That's the most important thing to share with community members is the logistical configuration of the World Congress Center.
Yeah. I will say opening session was awesome. You were fantastic.
Thanks.
There was great people up there, and they really made it conversational, and it was really lovely. So that was cool. If y'all missed that, it was great. And it set the tone. It really set a good tone.
Yeah, I heard a few people say the best opening session that they can remember are veterans who have been going to this for 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
And I've seen my fair share, and I can't necessarily say there's one that stands out above and beyond that one. So credit where it's due. The science fair certainly kept our team and you in particular plenty busy. What from the science fair kind of stands out to you? What was unique this year or just fun to see happening again? What science fair thoughts do you have?
I think the thing that's been really fun about the science fair, this is the big science fair that we do at BDC, and then we take a smaller, it's still oversized, but we take a smaller roadshow around chapters. And what's been nice this year is to see repeat customers, not necessarily from that we've seen before, but like people in the conference come back again, and then they come back again, and then they come back again. And kids especially, it's been really fun to have like kids go through with their groups, with their kid tracks, and then to see them come back with their parents and like dragging their parents and showing them certain games. So it was fun. We had a new module this year, looking at balancing, protein, how our body naturally balances itself, like through the clotting process, through the coagulation process, which is so fascinating if you think about it. Like our bodies just naturally keep ourselves in check.
Yeah.
Because if we didn't have those, other things that just kind of kept certain growth needed to stimulate to like form a clot in check, like we would overclot. And of course, as we all know, if you're deficient in one of those proteins in some way, like then your body again is out of balance. And we had a cool new game that kind of really enforced that teaching, and it was cool. It's always cool. It's the coolest thing we do.
How did you feel about the panel you hosted?
Loved the panel. Oh, it was about life stages, living with a bleeding disorder in the different stages of life. There was like young college students, and then there was 2 in their 30s or 40s, and then there was 2 glorious legend old timers. Randy Curtis was there, and Connie Montgomery, both have been on the show, were there, and oh, it was great. It was just a really fantastic conversation, and it was a packed room. Yeah. What about the stuff you hosted?
Also positive experiences. I didn't host anything this year. I was on 2 panels. One was a moment of reflection at the end that was about helping people kind of crystallize some takeaways before leaving BDC. And the other one was, I should remember this, Candid Conversations.
Oh, yeah.
So Dr. Mark Redding was a part of that, as well as a caregiver who lives in South America. Her name is escaping me at the moment. But what's neat, I've participated in Candid Conversations before as either a panelist or a host. And what's nice about the session is, as it sort of suggests by its very name, open-ended, very lived experience-based dialogue around what are we really thinking about? What are we really struggling with? I appreciate being in that room, and there was a dad in there of a younger child, relatively newly diagnosed, who was also in opening session. And during opening session, I made mention of Adam's passing away from head bleed, and that's spurring me to wonder, how do we better engage young people before they start transitioning, et cetera. And he was curious to hear a little bit more about the story because he's a relatively new parent, and one of the big fears is that, yes, someday my child is going to grow up, and will he take good enough care of himself? So it was nice to be I guess the point I'm making is it was nice to be reminded that there are new people coming to meetings all the time who haven't necessarily heard that story that, I or maybe a listener who speaks something, we can forget and assume, oh, people know my story. Oh, people know. No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
And you can give people the headline, and then if they have questions or want to follow up, they will. And that dad following up just made me glad, because I actually hadn't intended on speaking about Adam or the Believe Limited origin story in opening session. I thought it was going to be pretty Ryan White documentary, poster child focused. And then when Phil teed me up to share a little more, I just sort of ran with it. And I'm glad he did. I'm glad I kind of didn't know that, so I didn't have a chance to overthink it. And it was, again, just a reminder, there's new people coming in all the time, and some of their fears and concerns, worries, the unknowns in their life. These meetings and the connections they make go a long way toward addressing those. So it was a nice little exchange in that Candid Conversation session.
That's actually a really lovely reminder and point, because I do feel sometimes in the community we do feel like it's almost like a broken record, and especially with all of the new treatments that are available to us. We've had lots of conversations on the show about, folks that have really struggled with their joints or with prolonged bleeding, chronic pain, that all of a sudden are starting to experience a different avenue of life because of these new treatments, these new avenues. And it almost feels like sometimes the conversation, we're just like talking in an echo chamber, just like around and around and around. And to remember that there are new people coming into this community, there are new people that have never heard of what hemophilia is. I remember one of my families in Colorado, they have a very impactful story that when their son was born, they had a nurse, tell the diagnosis in the middle of the night and say, don't Google it. Someone will be with you tomorrow. Of course you Google it,
Yeah, especially after that direction.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But that's mindful. You said something, this is kind of like switching topics, but again, something that stayed with me a little bit. You said something, we were at the science fair and I asked how you were doing, and you were like, it seems like every session like morphs into a conversation about women with bleeding disorders and women with hemophilia in particular.
Yep.
And that's been like kind of like the through line of the conference this year. And the panel I was on, it really morphed. And then like when we opened it up for Q&A, I mean, it was almost like not about like life stages. It truly was like about diagnostic testing. And it's just so top of mind and so topical. And it was very noticeable this year.
Yeah. And it's
as
been
it should
building
be.
up. As it should be. Yes. And we should be making progress in an organized enough way that what I sense as the need for every room to become a discussion about women with bleeding disorders should hopefully go down. Right? Because as we start making progress and kind of focus how we communicate about that progress, the need for it to be in every corner, because the concern, to just look at it from a different point of view, what other needs and what other underserved areas aren't getting attention right now because there's only so much to go around, and we're putting attention in this worthy area and in this worthy area, but there's always areas that are being underserved. So as encouraged as I am by all the discussion and the idea that every room becomes a room about women with bleeding disorders, I am also staying aware of the conversations that may not be happening because of that. And that, we're going to feel that in 2-3 years when it's like, oh, we haven't been talking about blank for a while.
Right.
So,
Interesting.
how do we like stay tuned to that while also championing necessary conversation on the other hand? So it's a balancing act. But I thought overall the meeting had a great energy to it. There was the fact that it was as spread out as it was. Sometimes it's hard to kind of wrap your arms around like who all is here and where are all the big main stage moments. But it did feel like people were enthusiastic. And the last takeaway I'll share, and I'm sure this has been said in previous years, I was maybe just more sensitive to it being said, or maybe there was a concerted effort to message this more directly. I don't know. But I felt like I heard over and over again, make sure to bring what you learn here back home. Share it with your local community. Make sure the people who were not here can benefit from the information exchange and connections that took place here. And again, I'm sure that's to some degree been messaged before, but it was landing on me in a way that it felt specific. It felt motivated, like there was an NBDF decision. I again, don't know, I'm just speculating, behind doors to say, let's make sure to remind people that the education of BDC needs to live beyond these 3 days in Atlanta when they go to their home communities, their family education days, their camps, their weekend events, their walks, that they're sharing the things that they learned here. Remind people of that. And so I suppose I'll share that with any listeners who either were at BDC or frankly who listen to this podcast and learn things. Tell other people. That's how learning takes place. And frankly, as a patient, when I hear from another patient or a caregiver, a community member who says, hey, did you hear this podcast? Did you see this video? Did you see this article? Did you hear about the session on? I'm much more likely to pay attention to it than if I just see it in sort of a generic e-blast or from a corporate social post. So please, if there's things you're learning from this show, from the BDC, from HFA's resources, wherever you may be learning from, share it with other people. Don't underestimate your own power to dramatically influence someone else's life by simply sharing information with them that they just maybe so happened to need.
Right. And I get last say, sucker. We got so many people coming up to us saying that they love the show. Way more than
we
usual.
Did. Yeah, I was surprised.
People come up to you all the time, but people came up to me And that never happened. So I just want to shout out all of my new pals. Like there was a lot of wonderful people. So anyway, y'all, you are heard and you are seen. And anyway, it's like it has made this little baby recording a little bit more fun, I think, because there's like folks out there.
That's fair. Yeah, good point. Thank you to everybody who came and said something.
Yeah.
So let's get on to our segments that we have for today. The first one, our I'm Fine segment, hosted by Mr. Michael Bishop.
We love it. Y'all, I'm Fine aims to challenge the entrenched ideas around chronic resiliency and satisfaction with suboptimal outcomes by inspiring people with hemophilia to seek education and truly consider the possibilities. Sanofi seeks to expand the idea of what's possible for the hemophilia community. Take a deeper look at the science behind hemophilia and an important connection between factor activity levels and potential activities at levelsmatter.com. Now let's get on to I'm Fine with that Michael Bishop.
Hey everybody, I'm Michael Bishop and this is I'm Fine. I've done this segment with Patrick before and a few other things here on Bloodstream Media, but in case you have no idea who I am, I'm a 31-year-old writer, illustrator, podcaster, and musician from Ohio. I have severe hemophilia B with an allergy and inhibitor to factor IX products. I'm here to host a few of these, and I think generally it'll just be me hanging out with you and reflecting on all things hemophilia and mental health. It'll probably mostly be personal stories from my life, from which I'll pull some lessons or thoughts that I hope you can relate to in some way. Today I want to talk about a big surgery I had a couple months ago, and the role that hope and hopefulness plays in our lives, specifically when it comes to big surgeries or new medications. My left knee has always been a target joint, one of a few. But what's more, I dislocated my patella, my kneecap, when I was 11, which required a surgery to realign, and then I fractured my tibia and fibula a year later. Those two things, coupled with frequent bleeds, really destroyed that knee. There was a significant amount of chronic pain, and its bone-on-bone structure led to frequent bleeds. So, needless to say, it was a mess. And I had to give up a lot of things that I loved. I had to make a lot of compromises when it came to my mobility and the activities that I could do. So because my knee was so damaged at such a young age, my orthopedic surgeon had been talking to me about a potential knee replacement since I was in high school. He was very upfront with me, though, and said that if I had one at that age, I would likely need another one at some point in the future. And I think one knee replacement is about all I have in me, per knee at least. So for half my life, I would grit my teeth and deal with the pain and the limited mobility and the frequent bleeds and the mental health struggles that come along with having a joint like that. All of which really weighed on me throughout the years. They eventually became so commonplace that they felt normal, but I don't think the weight on my shoulders got any lighter, nor do I think I got any stronger. I think I just got used to moving a little more slowly. I got used to not being able to skateboard. I got used to not being able to walk around with my friends like I wanted to, and I even got used to the pain most of the time. Then once I entered my 30s, I took a job where I was traveling quite a bit, and my knee got progressively worse pretty quickly. I would often travel on the weekends, which would inevitably cause a bleed. Then I would come home, lay in bed in pain while waiting for the bleed to resolve, plan the next weekend's trips, and then do it all over again. I eventually had to quit that job, and it got to the point where I was in a wheelchair almost 100% of the time, which is not something that I was used to. I had used a wheelchair a lot in my life, and all manner of walking assistance, but I think I was able to pretend that it wasn't that big of a deal in those moments because I had those times in between where I was walking around, and I could kind of pretend that my knee wasn't that big of a deal. I could feel quote-unquote normal for a little while. But even with limiting my mobility almost completely, my knee was still too much day to day. It was still bleeding too much, it still hurt too much, and so I knew that it was time for a knee replacement. So I met with my surgeon, we did some x-rays, and he showed me exactly what was going on in there. It's one thing to feel degradation and kind of understand that it's happening, but it's another thing entirely to see it. He said it was one of the worst knees he had ever seen in his 30 years as a surgeon. And I don't have a ton of experience looking at knee x-rays, but based off of how mine looked, I was inclined to believe him. So we talked about the process of the replacement and what that would look like. Because I use a bypassing agent due to my allergy, we both knew it would be a bit of an uphill battle. But still, I signed up, and at the end of that appointment, we scheduled the surgery. I left his office, I went into the bathroom in the lobby, and I cried. I cried because I knew how painful it was going to be. I cried because I didn't want to be someone who needed a knee replacement at 31. And I cried because I was just so tired. So tired. I had been fighting this knee my entire life, and still it was asking me to do more. On the drive home, though, which was about an hour, I talked to my mom, and we got to imagine all of the cool things that would happen after the knee replacement. Our voices were filled with hope. I was going to walk again without pain. I was going to straighten my knee for the first time in 20 years and maybe even skateboard again. All of those things came rushing through me, and I got very excited. The fear was replaced with hopefulness. It felt a little bit like when you buy a Powerball ticket for the lottery. You go home, you look at the houses you'll be able to afford, you pick your dream car and build it online. You think about changing all of your friends' lives by giving them money. It's very hopeful and optimistic, and that's how I felt. Then the surgery day came. It was a difficult morning. I felt like canceling it, honestly. I was very scared to fully commit to it, which sounds silly because it was the day of, but the reality of the situation had finally hit me. But those fantasies came flooding back to me, those hopes for the future and what my life would look like 6 months from then, which helped see me through. But the surgery was more painful than I could have ever imagined. It immediately bled, and it was more pain than I had ever experienced, which is genuinely saying something. At one point, the staff at the surgical center told me that if I didn't stop crying out in pain, they were going to have to send me somewhere else because I was disturbing the other patients. Which is fair, but there wasn't a lot I could do about it. I laid in bed and I regretted ever agreeing to do the surgery. In that moment, all of those hopes slipped away. But eventually, I came home, the bleed settled, and I began the long process of physical therapy. I once again became incredibly motivated by the prospect of all those fantasies I had coming true. I literally thought sometimes, if I just get through this PT, I'll be skateboarding again soon, and that carried me through. But as the months passed, my knee wasn't giving me the superpowers that I thought it would. I finished physical therapy, and I could straighten it more than I could before surgery, but it wasn't completely straight. I have way less pain than I did before surgery, but it isn't painless. I can walk further than I could before surgery, but not as far as I want to. And I still can't skateboard. My knee just became an okay knee. It doesn't bleed, it doesn't have as much chronic pain, and that's all I need really. But it isn't all that I wanted. Reality had finally settled in a little bit. And this is a feeling I've had many times before. I think as hemophiliacs, it's easy to get in this headspace of this new thing is going to fix all my problems. The new surgery, the new medication, etc. This will be the cure-all that I've always needed. And those things likely will make your life better. Maybe you will achieve everything that you're imagining. But I've been a victim of my own high expectations. Then suddenly better doesn't feel better at all because it wasn't better enough. But if you're in this situation, take some time to reevaluate your goals. Recalibrate your feelings about where you are. Because if today is better than yesterday, or heck, even just as good, you're in a good place. We spend a lot of time feeling our bodies get worse. So take some time today to appreciate the parts of your body that isn't getting worse. And never give up that hope you feel. Use it as the tool that it is. Even if it leads you to some crazy places sometimes, places you won't get to, use it to get you through those hard times. And once you do, appreciate wherever you end up. Because if you're still going, you're doing enough. Thank you.
Sanofi aims to raise the bar for patients living with hemophilia. Reimagine what's possible by visiting rareblood.disorders.com to hear more about Sanofi's dedication to the bleeding disorder community. Thank you, Michael Bishop, for that latest installment of the I'm Fine mental health segment. We'll be back with the next one at the end of October. But we move now in what is, I guess, about to be, at the time we're recording, we're a few days early, but it is about to be International Plasma Awareness Week. And to talk about that, we have Anita Brikman on, the CEO of the Plasma Protein Therapeutics Association. Amy, what can you tell us about what we're about to hear?
I love Anita.
Okay, great.
Lady CEOs. No, Anita's back. Those of you that remember, Anita was on, I think earlier this year or late last year, I believe, the first time. She was in studio. She was actually here in LA. So we were in studio, which is fantastic. And we're talking about the Awareness Week, which is very important to their organization. But I think more importantly, the relationship between PPTA and the hemophilia community, the bleeding disorder community, as you know, is very important and important to her as she's leading this new organization. So I think it's really cool that she made time to stop by, and like she was at, her team was at BDC in Atlanta. So I just think it's cool and a cool partnership. So anyway, let's get to my conversation with Anita. Listeners, I am joined in studio.
In studio
with Anita
in
Brikman.
Los Angeles. Love being here.
In Los Angeles, California. We rarely, I'm trying to think of the last time we had a guest in studio, and I can't think of anybody. So you're making me be on my A game today.
Okay. I'm happy to be here and flew in from Washington, D.C.
I
and
know.
It's exciting to be here for a bunch of different events, but this was top of my list.
Yes. Okay. I was going to lie to listeners and be like, they flew in specifically for this interview. I will say Anita has been on the show before and was one of my favorite guests, our Lady CEO Energy. And your, she's going to hate that I'm going to mention her name, but Alana, your PR staff, used to work with NBDF. So
That's
it's
correct.
like all a thing.
It's a thing. And she brought so much great insights on the patient community when she joined PPTA. And so I'm thrilled that Alana's here with me as well in LA for this opportunity. Everyone needs an Alana, we talked about.
I need an Alana. That's been my takeaway from y'all's visit. So excited to talk to you today a little bit more about your organization. I guess for a refresh, tell listeners a little bit about what you do and your connection to hemophilia, just as a refresh.
Absolutely. So I'm Anita Brikman. I'm the president and CEO of PPTA. That's the Plasma Protein Therapeutics Association. And we are a healthcare association that represents collectors of donated human plasma, as well as manufacturers of plasma-derived therapies. The connection there is that bleeding disorders, such as hemophilia and von Willebrand, can be and are treated with plasma-derived therapies. Just one of a variety of rare diseases or inherited conditions that can be treated with plasma-derived medicines. Neurologic conditions, immune deficiencies, and then there are a bunch of other uses. It can be in emergency medicine, shock trauma. There are emerging areas where plasma-derived therapies can be helpful in secondary immune deficiencies. When somebody's going through cancer treatment, post-organ transplant, there are so many uses for plasma-derived therapies, but people don't know enough about it. And it's so great to be talking to the bleeding disorders community because we need your voices to talk about the importance of plasma donation to create these life-saving and life-changing medicines for people.
One of my biggest takeaways from our conversation last time was your commitment to the hemophilia and bleeding disorders community. That for me, I've been in this community now for a while, and I never knew that there was a connection. So I loved that, and I'm so glad you're here today to talk about International Plasma Awareness Week, which has maybe the best acronym of all time, IPAW.
Yes, except you start thinking about puppies, right?
That's why I think it's great. I was like, iPod, this is great.
No, so this is our International Plasma Awareness Week, IPAW. It is a worldwide celebration, and this is just about raising awareness of the need for plasma, as I said, ongoing need for donation, encouraging people who can donate to get out there to do it, and to raise awareness that the reason for those donations is that somewhere on the other side, a patient is going to get a plasma-derived therapy. So when you donate plasma, you are changing and improving somebody's life. This year, IPAW is coming up October 7th through 11th. And it's just so great to be talking to your community and encouraging them to get involved, whether it's on social media, talking to friends and family, just spreading the word.
That's fantastic. How can people get involved? Social media, spreading the word?
Exactly. And we're going to have a slew of assets that people can use. Yes, social media, graphics, all of that is going to be available at pptaglobal.org/IPAW. So hopefully we can put that.
No, we'll put that in the program notes.
In the program notes, exactly. A link there, pptaglobal.org/IPAW. A suite of social media posts that can be adapted to your own personal experience, but just encouraging people to think about plasma and plasma-derived therapies. Now, I'm very well aware that many in the bleeding disorders community here, especially in the U.S., don't necessarily rely on plasma-derived therapies, but certainly around the world, hemophilia is still very much treated with plasma-derived therapies, and many other bleeding disorder conditions, such as von Willebrand, continue to be treated with plasma-derived therapies. The plasma cannot be recreated in the lab. It is human plasma, and the proteins and antibodies in that plasma are what replace what's missing in another individual.
Absolutely. What a great way for our community to think outside themselves a little bit and to educate their own communities about hemophilia, bleeding disorders. I love it. So around that vein, why is it important for those in the bleeding disorder community to support IPAW?
So I think it is very important. People with bleeding disorders, by and large, probably cannot go and donate plasma. However, if you tell your friends and family how important plasma donation is and encouraging them to find a center where they might be able to do so, there's a tangential link. When we think about how many donations it takes to treat someone with hemophilia A, for example, it is 1,200 plasma donations for 1 year of therapy. So if you think about that, the amount of plasma it takes to create these medicines, and it varies for the different disorders, but that's very powerful for the bleeding disorders community. And some people, again, because of reactions they may have to recombinants, whatever, plasma-derived therapies still matter in the bleeding disorders community very much. And they are such an important, anyone out there listening as part of this community is such an important voice to say, our condition, as well as immune system conditions, neurological, all these different things, they may be rare, quote unquote, but when you look at this cumulatively, these are so many lives affected. And plasma donation matters to all these groups of people. So if individuals within the bleeding disorder community can also talk about plasma donation among the many other topics that they address, especially during IPAW, I think it has a cumulative effect.
Oh, me too. If someone's curious about donating plasma, especially for the first time, what should they know and where can they go for resources and all the things?
Okay, so we have another website, donatingplasma.org.
Yes, we're going to have all of these websites on the program notes. They're going to be in a list.
They will be in a list so you can find them. And now we're singing about plasma. All right. So, okay, let's say you have never donated plasma before. What can you expect? Okay, what is it, first of all? Let's talk about plasma. It's not blood, it's a blood component. It is the straw-colored liquid portion of your blood. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Sometimes we talk about this as liquid gold because of what's in it. It contains the proteins necessary for critical functions throughout the human body, and that is the antibodies that help fight a disease. If a child is born without a working immune system, imagine how many infections can land that child in the hospital. Yeah. There are also the proteins and clotting factors that are so necessary for people with bleeding disorders. But there are a variety of serious, chronic, and life-threatening medical conditions treated with plasma-derived therapies. Okay, so as a donor, you should know where that plasma donation is going. But what is the process you can expect? It is similar to donating blood, but different. It takes a little bit longer. It is a process called plasmapheresis. Big word, but basically what it means is the plasma is separated from the red blood cells and other cellular components, the platelets, all of that goes back to the donor. And it's just the plasma that is taken. There's also saline that is returned to the donor's bloodstream for rehydration. So this process takes a little bit longer. And the first time you go in, there is a health screening to make sure you're able to donate.
Right.
They check pulse, blood pressure, similar to donating blood, but just a little bit more involved. And just like you would before a blood donation, you want to be well hydrated, have had a really good meal, protein, etc. So a lot of the same things that if you're a regular blood donor, you could think about doing before you donate plasma. But all of this is laid out on donatingplasma.org, as well as where you could find a plasma donation center near you. And more of them are opening in California all the time.
Oh, that's great to know. That's great to know. So IPAW is coming up. It's coming up here. How can the bleeding disorders community continue to support plasma donation and y'all year-round?
Year-round, it's just talking about the need for plasma donation, remembering that that's a part of this whole ecosystem of developing life-saving therapies, and thinking about all the people out there with various disorders. Plasma can be somewhat of a uniting force in the sense of how many people can live perfectly healthy lives if they have access to these therapies. So spreading the word about plasma donation, the importance of plasma-derived therapies, mentioning it on social media, encouraging family and friends to consider becoming a regular plasma donor because there are patients in need.
Anita, as always, thank you for joining us. I always love when you come. It's always a great conversation, but even more so, I think it is just such an important reminder for our community, especially here in the States, to kind of think outside of themselves and to really get behind this in a way and to follow your work. And we just really appreciate it. We really appreciate your partnership with the bleeding disorder community and, other rare disease communities. So thank you so much for the work you do.
It's wonderful. And I really like that closing message about thinking outside of what we experience here in the United States, because the needs in other lower and middle income countries, it is a completely different landscape. Right. And there are still too many patients with bleeding disorders who do not have access to the therapies they need, and that needs to change.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you again, Michael. And thank you, listeners, for joining today's program. Thanks, as always, to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. BleedingDisorders.com for more. And our I'm Fine mental health segment sponsor, Sanofi. We could not produce this show without your support, and we are grateful for it. All right, Marlon. Brando, Bordeaux.
Nobody gets that joke. No one gets that joke. It was a text joke.
Well, we'll see if they catch on. Our next episode is out on October 11th. What can the listeners expect to hear?
Okay, we have our latest gene therapy segment, and we're going to break down common myths about gene therapy treatment, which, as you know, there's 90,000 myths.
Yeah, already.
So anyway, we won't do 90,000, but we'll do a few. Anyway, it's gonna be a banger.
Well, we will look forward to that on October 11th. And with that, that is all for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Bloodstream Podcast wherever you listen to have the next episode delivered to you the moment it goes live.
And as always, loyal listeners, mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com is that email address that you can use to inquire about all of our casting opportunities. We actually have a new casting opportunity coming up that we'll share once we are ready, but there's some new things percolating, very fun. So make sure to stay tuned, if you will. And then always find us on social media. We're on all the socials.
And so are you.
So many socials.
I am your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your other host, Amy Bradford.
And until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.